Welcome to Supply Circles, stories from the innovators, disruptors and improvers in supply chain management today. Brought to you by AI Group.
Hello and welcome back to Supply Circles. I'm James Scotland, coming to you today from Yunganbar country, and this is the business improvement podcast that asks the question, how can we in Australia create supply chains that are resilient and sustainable at a time when we're implementing the challenges of digitalising and decarbonising our businesses and our supply chains? That's a great question. Each fortnight, I delve into different sections of the end-to-end supply chain. I chat with fascinating, interesting and thought-provoking people to try to uncover the latest thinking and concepts in this area. And that, of course, brings us to today's guest, Susan Heffernan, a successful business person, marketer, and supply chain manager with a long history of business in China. I'm keen to get her insights into doing business in China and to learn from her experience. It's actually a very important issue, as I'm sure you know. China is a critical market for Australia, and it's growing every year. Official figures report China is already Australia's largest two-way trading partner, accounting for 27% of our overall global goods and services trade in 2023. And the two-way trade with China increased 9.2% last year, and it now totals $326.9 billion every year, growing. So there's no doubt we as supply chain managers, as business improvement managers, as business development managers, even just as managers, need to be keenly interested and aware of China. So let's chat to a fascinating and interesting person and find out about her time in country, see what we can learn. Welcome to the show, Susan.
Thank you. 大家好，欢迎收看播客. Hi, James. Great to be here with you.
I love the language. It's like a song, isn't it?
It is.
Such a beautiful language. I guess that was Mandarin. Is Mandarin the same as all the other languages? Do they have the same genesis, or are they completely different?
Oh, some of them are completely different. Shanghai Hua, Shanghai language, and say in the south, every place is different. Mandarin obviously being the main language.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I thought maybe there was a genesis. I was in Spain a little while ago, and I realised that Spanish and Italian sound the same. You know, those señor or señorita, and because they both came from the Roman Empire. They were both parts of the Roman Empire, and the languages evolved. Mm. But in China, they didn't evolve from each other. They were completely different by the sound of it.
Well, there's different dialects came from different provinces and different parts of China. So, not everything is the same.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is the point, isn't it? We talk about doing business with China, but in actual fact, there's nothing homogenous about this massive country. There's billions of people there, and there's a big landmass. How do you think of China when people say, tell me about China?
I think it's complex. It's like a giant onion. You just keep peeling off different layers to understand or try to understand the complexity of the market and, of the diversity of the people, really, and the culture.
Yeah, and it's no doubt like the rest of the world changing as each generation as well. So you've got different locations, you've got different generations, you've got different cultural aspects. What do you think we think of when we think of China? Are we talking about, do we think of Shanghai or the type of business that happens in Shanghai? Or what do you think Australians think of when we talk about the market of China?
I think traditionally people have thought about China as being a place where you can make cheap goods. And, years back that was true. But now actually cost of production and cost of labor can be even higher than Australia now. So if you take perhaps industrial designers, graphic designers, the cost of this talent would be more expensive in China than Australia now. So it's totally changed from before. The perception isn't what we used to think of it being. And also things like technology, and it's an incredibly technically advanced nation. You can perform so much better in business because technology has really helped us. In the past, we didn't have that, but now we're sort of streets. What China's doing to improve their business by using technology is really incredible. You even take the WeChat platform, how much that's helped the communication when you're working in a business, because your whole team is on one platform. You can get someone to answer you, in seconds, as opposed to waiting for an email to come back to you days and days later.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it described that China is such a big country that you can get anything in China. You can get it from the cheap crap that you talk about if you go somewhere and say, I need something cheap crap. Or if you went something and said, I really need this to be high-end, I need this to be in the space race, it can be handled that as well. It's an amazing country, yeah. Are they? Do you find that the day-to-day person is more technically advanced or technology advanced? The reason I ask that is I have a friend in Japan at the moment. She said, "You won't believe the Tokyo people. They're like fully digitalized. We've got no idea."
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, even it's pretty. It was quite a surprise to me when I came back to Australia and people were still sending each other SMSs. I really couldn't even remember what an SMS was. And, yet we're still communicating with each other on SMS. So that's just one example, how the technology is, we're still a little bit, China's really overtaken us. That's for sure, in terms of technology and communication. And communication, I believe, in terms of supply chain it's so important. It's probably the most critical part of being successful in supply chain is your ability to communicate in a timely manner, but also in terms of people actually understanding you and what you mean.
Yeah, we talk on this podcast about the need to digitalize the supply chain so that the communication, the understanding, the flow of data is much faster, and so we'll come back to that. But how did you end up in China? You're calling in from Brisbane today. Are you a Queenslander?
I am. That's right.
Are you a Queenslander? Did you grow up in Queensland and go back there, or what's the story? Tell us the Susan Heffernan journey.
I'm a Melbourneian. I'm a newbie to Queensland. I grew up
We've got lots of people from Melbourne saying, yeah, go. So you grew up.
Yeah, I grew up in Melbourne, and my fascination really with China began because my grandmother was hosting Asian students in her house back when the University of Melbourne was the first university in Australia to open to Asian students. So she was pretty entrepreneurial and had a big house and decided to rent rooms out. So really I grew up with this fascination for Chinese culture because I had Christmas and then I had Chinese New Year. So I stayed in Australia really until I got a scholarship to go to Beijing University for part of my undergraduate degree, and then I never left.
What do you mean you never left? How long were you there for?
Quite a few decades.
Quite a few. Okay, we'll leave it at that. So you landed there and you went to uni, got a job or started a business. Tell us a story. Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I first got a job with an Australian insurance company because I was able to be based in Beijing, and that's where I wanted to be. And following on from that, I worked with a business centre company and then a furniture company. And it got to the point where I really wanted to combine my previously in my education, I'd also studied visual merchandising. So I wanted to combine my creative side with my business side. So the only way I could really see myself doing that and not being put in a box by a recruiter was to start my own company, which I did. So I wanted to go into production of home furniture. So I did a lot of study on factories for a couple of years, and then just sort of by chance or just by how it works out, my first client was a retail client, and that's how I started in the retail furnishings business. And I just built the business off the back of each order.
You started off with a credit card and went crazy, yeah. Maybe a bit more than that.
I didn't even have that. I was really, those. I remember joining the Entrepreneurs Organization in Shanghai, and all these people were talking about their backers and their private equity partners, and I didn't even know what that was. I was like, doesn't everyone just use their hands and sweat and blood to start a business? And so that was really quite interesting. And I think in China that actually worked well because you've got to really, when you're starting from scratch, you really have to go slowly. And if you've got investors and you haven't had the experience in China, you're going to get that really a lot of pressure from your investors. Whereas I was able to go at my speed and slowly and take everything carefully. So I really think even though there was times when I was thinking, wow, I wish I had someone else's money. It actually probably was better in the long run.
Did you say you started a manufacturing business? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
So you're a young female Australian opening a manufacturing business in China. That seems like a stretch, Susan. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That seems like a stretch for my little mind. How hard was that?
Look, there was huge challenges along the way. I think that, one of the you have to be really resilient to be able to, especially back in those days, you really need a lot of resilience to keep going, determinations, patience. I was a runner when I was younger. I think that helped me, a long distance runner. I think the mentality, you really have to have a lot of mental strength because a lot of things come along and sort of, try to stop you. But it's really the determination to succeed. And that's a little bit like running a marathon, really. You have to be mentally there for the long term.
Well, I'm a marathoner, and I've had many people say that you need no brains to run a marathon. You don't need a lot of brains. It's better if you don't have any. Particularly when I say, well, let's get up at 4 o'clock and go for a run for like 2 hours. They say, no, thank you. Tell me about resilience. What do you think resilience is? I love that word. It's a word that I use in the intro. How do you think when you hear that, when you say that word resilience, what comes to mind, particularly in terms of your younger days when you were starting the business?
Well, it really means that you just keep going. You don't stop. Nothing should stop you from, and there's a really good word in Chinese, meiyo, and it sort of translates as don't have. And what I learned really early on in those days was it just means try another way, try harder. And I think that a lot of the times we look at people and they said, that's not possible. You can't do that. Or you might look at a rule book and the rules say you can't do that. Well, actually, that in China, that never stopped me. It just meant, and I really worked this out, it just meant just go left instead of straight, go right, go up, go down, go around, because you'll find a way, and don't let mayo stop you.
I love it. I think, learn the rules of the game. I think the Harvey, what his name is from the Suits TV show, says learn the rules, not so you can obey them, but so that you can make them suit you. The rules are there for you to operate, not for you to live within the cage. Yeah, it sounds like a good part of resilience.
And rules and regulations, half the time, even the government didn't know how to interpret them. Some of them were written but not enacted. So sometimes you're just going around, seeing what you can do, how you can do it. And that's the other thing. If you don't have the flexibility to be able to cope with that kind of environment, then you will never survive in China. You absolutely must have flexibility and the ability to chop and change whenever something comes your way, and be ready, be agile.
So running a business in China, was there a lot of government interference? I mean, that's one of the stereotypes that a communist country will have a heavy hand in your private enterprise. I've heard that's not the case.
Look, it depends on the size of your company, how much money you're making, how noticeable you are, like how noticed you are. And I tried to be pretty low key. My business was mostly B2B, so they didn't really, luckily I wasn't really in their radar. But, in terms of manufacturing, yes, I'd have government officials coming to me all the time to see what I was doing. And, in the early days, there was a lot of, people making money off people, that big C word. So that was really mostly the biggest interference that I had was, local government trying to make sure that they could, see how they could make extra money.
So you run a manufacturing business in China, having never run any business in Australia.
Exactly.
So how does manufacturing work? I'd love to get your view of the keys to manufacturing from someone who is from a different environment.
But I think, there's lots of huge Chinese companies that are still private companies, and all of those, they're all manufacturers, and they all started, just by themselves and then just added one person at a time. I mean, most of them, like Italian companies, are family companies. So they add a brother, add an auntie, add a son. Unfortunately, I couldn't add anyone. And I think, that's how you do it, and you just do it step by step. I mean, manufacturing companies outsource a lot of their production in the beginning. They're not doing everything themselves. Even like, you take an iPhone, in the beginning, they weren't doing everything in-house either. So, and in fact, I don't think they are at the moment. They're still not. They've got outsourced suppliers. So it really takes a huge conglomerate and a long time to build all the internal competencies inside your own facility. So you just do it step by step. And also each machine or each process will have a different environmental bureau requirement. You might not even be in the right zone. You might not be allowed to do it there. So you just, again, step by step.
Yeah, of course, Apple's famous for not having any manufacturing companies. Any manufacturing sites. They're not a manufacturing company. They're probably the most famous company in the world, and yet they don't own any manufacturing. And of course, Uber doesn't own any cars, and Airbnb don't own any hotels. That's the way of the world, this outsourced thing. It makes an interesting question about what is manufacturing when we talk in Australia about bringing manufacturing back home. What is manufacturing? Is it assembly, or is it actually making stuff, or how's it all come together?
Yeah, and in my facility, especially in the beginning, when I didn't have the what we call the manufacturing, I would have to choose which one of my suppliers had the biggest factory, or which supplier was producing the biggest component of that product. And then I would ship all of the other components into that supplier's factory and do the assembly, packing and distribution. But obviously after a while that sort of got messy, and that's why I was able to build up the funding to be able to build my own, or have my own facility to do that. But previous to that, I had to choose a supplier where I would have to do the final product installation.
Which brings me to the question that I was going to ask ages ago, but we've had a nice wander. What's it like doing business in China? It's clearly a person-to-person type environment. It's very much integrated. But what do the Chinese like to deal with? I know that's a kind of a stereotype question, but just tell me about your experiences about dealing with Chinese business.
Look, actually, sometimes it can drive you crazy, but other times I feel like if you really can make a huge effort to get to know people, understand them, make friends with them, then you can grow together. You can solve problems together. Sometimes when, you've got a problem with a supplier, the best way to deal with it is to actually help them solve the problem. I mean, even though they probably caused it in the first place, but it is your problem actually in the end of the day, because if you can be alongside with them and solve the problem together rather than blaming somebody, you'll get a lot further. So I feel like dealing with Chinese people, I like it because they're always open. They always want to come to the table. You can always talk to them. No one shuts the door, and no one ghosts you. They're always willing to talk. It's very different from what I've experienced here.
Oh, do you want to expand on that more?
No, because someone might send me hate mail.
Well, they won't send it to you on...
It's not everyone here. It's just...
Well, they won't send it to you on WeChat probably because they're not using it. What were your favourite parts of China to move around in? There's a lot of different parts of China. There's some parts that I absolutely adore.
Oh, well, I mean, I love Shanghai. Shanghai is so cosmopolitan, and it's an amazing city. It's so fast. It's so convenient. You can get, even you take it back to, you might be working on a project and suddenly you realize that, there's someone in the warehouse or the installation team that needs something special and you haven't got it. You can get it the same day. I mean, you just go on an app and order something. It's so fast and so convenient. Public transport is so convenient. There's so many cultural activities. There's not just your Chinese friends, but there's your expatriate friends, and everyone mixes together. It's just the vibrancy that I love. And I mean, in terms of a more relaxing place, I love Guilin and Yangshuo in Guangxi province. That's a really amazing landscape and super interesting.
And completely different from Shanghai.
Yeah.
We should take a break.
Okay.
And come back and talk about actually doing business, and let's dig a bit deeper. Before we go, I love Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year. It's just fantastic. And I've been lucky enough to be in lots of different parts of Asia during Lunar New Year. Do you like it? Do your kids love it? The family, is it a big deal for you guys, or do you kind of give it a miss these days?
Oh yeah, I mean it's just a pity that they banned fireworks, because I used to really love the fireworks, especially when you also do it in your company to let in the good luck for next year. But unfortunately, the self firework letting off has been banned now. You can only watch it, and then it's changed to light show now, which is probably more environmentally friendly anyway.
So what, you let off fireworks in your company?
Oh, everyone used to do that, yeah, to let out the bad demons and let in the good luck.
Yeah, I've had the dragon come through my my factory in Darwin, but not my business in Darwin, but not the fireworks. That would have been fantastic fun. Yeah. All right, we'll take a break and we'll come back and talk about business. Yeah.
Okay, great.
The largest Australian workplace changes in over a decade
Underpaying
are about
workers
to impact
could
your
result
business.
in crippling fines.
There'll be new rules about when a casual employee
The laws are
has the right
employees will have the right
to disconnect.
Workplace laws are changing. Pay attention or pay the price. Safeguard your business with Australian Industry Group. The legal experts at Australian Industry Group will help you navigate the new legislation and prepare your business for the changes. Become a member today at aigroup.com.au.
Susan, you were working supply chains in China for many years in different businesses. You said you started in manufacturing, but then you moved into other businesses. What's it like trying to engage suppliers? You spoke a little bit about it before the break, but you find that it's very personal. Is that the way that you engage with suppliers? I ask this question because it might be better to frame it as, if I was thinking about doing business in China, what would be your advice to go and find a supplier for my business?
I guess if it's a small, depending on what you're doing, for example, what I was doing was bespoke. So that means that every single order is different. And because China's been traditionally more of a mass market production, suppliers don't really like doing bespoke. So you really must have a very tight relationship to be able to get the suppliers to take on board your bespoke order. So that means that you're going to have to find people that are willing to be friendly to you. I mean, they're all friendly, actually, if you're friendly. You might start off by, looking for lists or going to trade shows to find suppliers. But actually, if you're doing work like I was doing, you need to find a factory that's got skilled labourers. And, these kind of skilled workers in Italy are called craftsmen, but in China, they're all called workers. So it's really, you must be able to identify if that factory really has the skilled workers or the craftsmen that you need. And that's a really
great insight. That's a great insight.
And, what I found is that when I was working a lot with stainless steel, all of my stainless steel workers were all over 50 years old, because the younger people didn't want to be doing this kind of role that called them workers. They lost face. It wasn't, their parents didn't want them to be workers. But actually it's, as we know, this kind of craftsmanship is highly skilled. So that's why all of my stainless steel workers, they're wearing these really thick glasses, because they're, 50, 60, 70 years old. So it's, really having to look for this kind of craftsman / worker to find the factories that really can help you. And, actually I put my own team into lots of these factories and trained them up, because that was the way that I was able to achieve the quality that my competitors were achieving in Italy.
As time goes on, we're getting more and more requirements on me as a business person to fully understand my suppliers and my supply chain. I must be able to say, no, I'm not using modern day slavery. Yes, I am using environmental friendly places. The manufacturing processes are correct. The quality is up to the standard. There's a whole bunch of things I need from my suppliers. They need to tell me the truth. Can I get that from the Chinese suppliers? Is that the normal way of doing business?
I suppose if you're working in a multinational or a corporate with a lot of money, then you're going to be working with bigger quantities, and therefore you'll have more opportunity to find more factories. But if you're a smaller player, it's not so easy, and you might you might get the supplier to fill out a form for you that's, that yes, we don't have child labor, blah, 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 and you go and visit their factory. But honestly, they're going to sub out to people. It's quite difficult to control who they're subbing out to. You might not know.
Yeah, that's what, that's the people I deal with every day. That's what they tell me. Yes, I understand there's a requirement for me to tell my buyers that my supply chain is doing the right thing, but it's hard to get the information. I was hoping you'd be able to give me some insights, Susan. Apart from yes, it's just hard.
I'm not going to say it's not there, but child labour is not something that's really definitely not in China, in modern day China, even in the tier 2 cities. It's not really child labour because, especially nowadays, parents want their children to be studying, not working at any opportunity. I mean, even if they're from a poorer region or they've not had the same opportunities as people in the city, they don't want their children to be working. They want them to be studying.
It's not only children, though. It's also this modern-day slavery, the lack of opportunity to leave the employment, the lack of opportunity to move around to get better conditions. It's that sort of indenture type thing where I'm stuck there and I can't. And where you go, of course, is a problem for the textile industry.
But you also get workers who want to work 60 hours a week. They don't want to work 30 hours a week. And I have not been able to pass certain audits because the workers were working more than 37 hours a week. So we're talking about French companies mainly. And the workers are working at least another 20 hours on that, but they want to because they want to be able to send the money home to support their families. Otherwise, they can't support their families. So actually, it works both ways. They want to be there.
We raised this question once before when we talked about modern-day slavery with another supply chain manager and with Andy, and we discussed the fact that I might go to that factory and say, well, if you don't raise your standards, I'm going to move my business elsewhere. And the people that are directly affected by me moving my business elsewhere are the people who are enslaved. It's not the owners. They just say, okay, you're out of work, or whatever. So it's an ethical issue. How do you raise difficult questions when dealing with your Chinese suppliers? Is it because you mentioned face before? Do you just sort of go up there and say, hey, I've got a problem here? Or do you take a little while to try and, warm it up? But what's the best way of dealing with, I hate saying with the Chinese because it's sort of homogeneous, but with the suppliers in this market?
Well, definitely I'd normally say you're going to take a bit of a warm up approach and, you're going to have a cup of tea with them. You're going to go over and you're just going to, call up and say you're popping over for a cup of tea. Or you use an excuse to have a meeting about something else. You
go over and have a cup of tea. Is that real?
Yeah. And depending on how big the problem is, you might have to, you probably sit there for a bit longer because they're obviously anticipating that you're going to come over with a problem. So the longer that you sit there, and I know why, I can sort of understand why perhaps someone coming over from Australia might think, God, can we just get on with this? So many other things to do. But actually giving that time to warm up and to drink tea and to not be so direct, somehow it makes everybody feel better. And no one feels oppressed or it slows down any anger or frustration. Maybe frustration's the wrong word, but because you can be frustrated sitting there.
Must have been a surprise or a bit of a shock when you came back to Australia or went over to Europe and did business, whatever. It seems like it operates at a different pace. Yeah.
But in terms of, let's say Italy, I think there's a lot of commonality between Italians and Chinese. I feel like the way that you should engage in food and drink and chitty chat before you talk about business, and you should get to know each other, and then you can talk about business because friendship is, most important. So for me, that although Italians can be a lot slower to make things happen than Chinese, but definitely this sort of hospitality culture is very, very similar.
Yeah.
But the speed thing is, for me is very frustrating because I'm so used to a strategy being put in place and then actioned straight away.
The speed thing in China or here is frustrating?
Yeah, in China.
Yeah, right.
Not
yeah,
here.
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a reasonable argument, a position that says that in some of the Western worlds, the US in particular, in Australia, there is the rule of law that is very clearly defined of what the actions are between people. Everything is actually broken down into laws. So if you and I have some sort of minor dispute about business, we just take it to the lawyers and they sort it out. If we have a major dispute, we take it to the lawyers and they sort it out. Whereas in the countries where there is not as clearly defined rule of law, you need relationships to replace the rule of law because we really need to trust each other. There's no need to trust each other if dealing in the US or the Australian market. We just sign a contract and then we rely on the bit of paper. Do you think that's got legs?
Look, I think that the legal system in China can be really good. I mean, it's really improved a lot over the years, but just because you've got the law doesn't mean that, you're not going to waste a lot of time and a lot of money trying to sort something out. So at the end of the day, people just revert back to this negotiation. And if you've already, if you've got the door open and you haven't slammed it in someone's face, then that's the best and the fastest way. And it's also the cheapest way. So that's what it always tends to happen. If someone's got a supply chain contract and they don't deliver on time, yeah, sure, you can try to sue them for late fees and all this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, nobody wins. And it just, again, comes back to let's just come to the table and talk it out. And I think that that's what I appreciate in a way. There's always, I said this earlier, I think there's always the opportunity to sit down and talk. And you might not come out with everything you want. It might be 70-30, but it's not ever going to be 0-100 because that's just not how it works.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was in the transport business for a while and I was dealing with a company full of Greek brothers. And they were young Greeks, not old Greeks, so it's in their 20s and 30s. One day, 3 of them came into my office and with a big bottle of Johnny Walker Red Scotch that they put on my desk and then sat down. And I looked at the red and looked at them and looked at the bottle of red and looked at them. And finally one of them said, "What are you thinking, James?" And I said, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts."
Yes.
And it turned out they wanted something pretty big from me, but they softened it up. But it wasn't any subtle. There's no subtlety about it. Here I'm bribing you, have a bribe. Where it sounds like your experience is that in Italian as well, it could be a bit more dynamic than that, a bit more nuanced. You've been there for a while. You were there for quite a while, so I guess you made it. I know people that have been in other countries, and after a while they think, "I just got to go home. I'm sick of this. I used to love it here. I don't like it here anymore." Did you get to that stage? Do you still like the Chinese culture and people and environment?
I guess there was probably moments where I felt, damn, this is too hard. I can't do this anymore. But there is something that, just pulls you back every time. And I think that, yeah, I love it. It's the challenge it's the challenge and the vibrancy that I love.
Do you still have business interests over there, or have you moved back here full time?
No, I moved between China and Australia. It's pretty convenient, especially from Brisbane. You've got a very easy China Eastern flight that leaves at 11 a.m. You get there by 7.
Oh, that's very civilized, isn't it? Yeah.
It's very civilized. And so currently I'm sort of leveraging my experience and helping clients between Australia and China, and also still some global clients that are doing things in China. But actually, interestingly, now I've got some Chinese companies that are trying to do things in Australia. And I think that's where we will see a bit of a shift in what we would, in the topic of supply chain, where they will try to look for joint venture partners in Australia, because that will be the easiest for them in terms of, investment boards and company setups, so that they can perhaps put a company that might do installation here. They might do the main manufacturing in China and bring goods in and just do the installation here. I think that's what we'll see more of going forward.
A lot of the time when we're talking about supply chains, there's this idea of, as a buyer, I want to deal with, like me, I want companies, suppliers that have my same DNA, that approach business the same way, because it's much easier to build that relationship with like-minded businesses. If a Chinese company is coming here through you to try and find a JV or something, what sort of companies do you think they'd be looking for? Not necessarily what industry sector, but what kind of What kind of DNA would you be trying to identify?
I believe it's people that are really open personalities and people that are willing to have a dinner with them and a drink with them, and because it's quite extraordinary sometimes how many people say, "Oh, it's 5 o'clock. I've got to go now. I don't want to take you out for dinner," but actually, that's really missing the point. I think that I want to be able to connect them with people that are really open to getting to know them and to be friends with them, because that is the critical factor here. Can you both be actually friends with each other, get along, have, as you just said, have the same DNA? It's really important.
Are they trustworthy? Do you find that we could go into a relationship? I mean, I know that's a broad question, but there are parts of the world that I've done business where I have done business where I know that I have to watch everything. I've got to be very careful about what I say. I've got to be careful about what they're saying. Way and above normal business. I did a bit of work in Hong Kong and didn't find that to be the case. I found people were quite open with me because there was this thing about face. I've got to make sure that I'm a reputable person. Also with the Chinese that I dealt with in Malaysia had that same sort of, there was an openness about them that I could rely on. Am I being foolish here, or is it a nice way to approach it?
No, I think it's absolutely the correct way to approach it. Again, it boils back to no one wants to talk business with you until they've got to know you, because maybe they get, after a couple of cups of tea or dinner, they think, "Oh, actually, James, you're not my cup of tea." And then they move on. But if they gel with you, then it'll go to the next stage, and talking about business, you'll start to develop and build up this feeling of trust. And that's what I've always felt. And it's Italians can be, comparing it again back to Italy, whenever I've gone to Italy, I've always been sort of greeted with open arms and food and wine and drinks and friendship, and then business starts. And actually it makes everyone more comfortable. And if you don't actually feel that you're gelling, you just move on and you haven't wasted time about business or trying to work out whether you can get along or not.
I think it's time for me to go to Italy. That sounds fabulous. Even if it was just the food and drink part, we can do business later on. What specifically are you doing now? Are you a business connector? Is that what you are?
I'm a business connector, but of course, my strength is what I've done in China for the last few decades, and connecting people together. Of course, I come from a design background as well, so obviously I'm still very interested in anything that I can do that's design orientated. But China's my passion.
When dealing with when I'm trying to sell products in China, when I'm trying to get a buyer rather than a supplier, is it the same? Is it the same sort of way of doing business, or is there anything I should know? What advice would you give me if I was trying to sell my products?
Okay, well, I have always, when I started the business, I was pretty much 90% export, 10% selling into China. So different business model, because when you're exporting, usually it was an FOB order. So that means you get your full payment before goods leave port. Whereas in China, they don't want to pay. So if you're trying to get a deal, they won't follow your FOB terms, which is, when you're a manufacturer, 50% deposit and 50% before goods leave. They want to not pay anything for deposit, and then finally you might be able to get your 50%, but then when it comes to the final 50%, they want this sort of Australia style payment terms. But obviously that might be all right if you were having a product that you can put back on the shelf if the customer didn't want it. But when you're doing a bespoke order, you can't put that back on the shelf or back in the warehouse. So I guess I lost many deals, or I turned away many deals because I didn't want to do that kind of chasing payment thing. But I think you have to be really strict. So if you're trying to find a buyer and you've got one, if they won't follow your payment terms, my advice is don't do it. Otherwise, you'll be chasing payment for years.
Mm-hmm. I had a little bit to do with the citrus industry in Australia for a little while, and I was selling what I used to call selling mandarins to the mandarins. No one else called it that, just me. But one of the people who was very experienced in the Chinese market said that if you've got a problem with your client, with your buyer over there, particularly if you've got a problem with payments, get on a plane, go over there and see them face to face. You won't resolve it by doing it over Teams or by phone. And it's money. Go and get your money.
I think communication, really communication is the key. And as you just said, face to face, you can't really do anything over Zoom or telephone. It's not the same. You need to front up. You need to be there. Again, if you're starting a business, you want to do something in China, you need to be there. You need to smell the smells, walk around, get a feel for it for yourself. And, if you finally want to do something there, then engage with a partner that's actually done business on the ground. I mean, there's many service providers around that might be able to offer some really good advice, theoretical advice, legal advice, accounting. But actually, if you need to have someone to hold your hand or get you started, then make sure you choose someone who's actually done a business before, because running a business is very different from providing service to somebody about a business, as you would fully understand.
Wow, that's good advice. Yeah. I mean, I really like that idea about you would hop on the plane and go down to Melbourne if you wanted to get paid and you're having trouble. So hop on the plane and go to Beijing. It's there's no difference. You have to go and meet your buyer.
Yeah, I don't think you should get yourself in a position where you're not getting paid. I think that's don't take the business if your payment terms aren't really tight.
Good advice indeed. I liked our chat. It's been wonderful. Thank you, Susan. We've talked about resilience. We talked about this idea about the workers versus the craftsmen. It's nice to get that sort of insight and a whole bunch of other insights. It's been really good. You mentioned a couple of times, we talked about face. And when I was doing I did a master's degree in international management, international business. And one of the things that we learnt when we were doing cultural immersion is that although we hear about face, we in Australia don't understand the concept. It's not really something we know. We think we do, but we don't really. You've been in country for a long time. Do you understand face?
Yeah, probably too much actually, because I sometimes, I have to really adapt myself back in Australia to perhaps because I'm so used to the face way of doing things. I like it because it doesn't offend anybody, and it means that people don't have to shut the door on you. I really think it's about it also having high EQ. It can be similar to that.
What is it?
It just makes people feel more comfortable to be not being direct, like so aggressive or oppressive in their face. So you can softly approach something without offending somebody. And, in Chinese culture, it's very important not to burn a bridge, because you might have to walk over that bridge again. And perhaps we say, well, it doesn't matter, there's many bridges and tunnels I can go over, but you might need that exact bridge again one day. So that's why, it's better not to offend anybody and to let them save face, because you can find many ways to get what you want or from somebody without offending them.
Yeah, there's plenty more fish in the sea, but have you seen those slimy things that are in the sea, or those amoebas and those shellfish and those sharks? I mean, it's not the best place to go looking, is it? There's plenty of other fish in the sea, but they're not all pleasant. So the idea is just kind of, take it easy and take it slow and get to know people and don't offend them. Is that kind of like the main idea? And just try and get things done by being high EQ, which I really like that idea. I like that. Thank you so much. This has been a good conversation. What's next for you? Are you heading back to China soon? I am. I'm heading back in a couple of weeks. And how long do you normally stay? Do you stay very long, or do you sort of go backwards and forwards like it's a taxi? Usually every two. I'll be there this time for 2 to 3 weeks. Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, enjoy it. You're going back to summer, so that'll be nice. Yeah, apparently it's already 39 degrees. Well, enjoy it. Thank you for being on the show. I really, really, really appreciate it. Wish you all the best. We'll put some contact details on how people can talk to you if they want to in our show notes, and all the best. Thanks for having me on the show. It was great to talk. Well, that's it for another episode of Supply Circles. Thanks again to everyone for listening, and thank you for your feedback. If you have any feedback on today's discussion with Susan, or ideas for the show, or just want to give me some feedback, hit me up at james.scotland@aigroup.com.au, or head over to my LinkedIn page. I'd love to hear from you. And we'll be back in a fortnight with more business improvement insights into the keys to building sustainable supply chains. Thanks for joining me. This is Supplier Circles. I'm James Scotland. Bye for now.